Here's a quick recording to show you that the rear brake caliper and mounting bracket will not allow the caliper to mount over the rotor. The register ring is installed correctly. The rotor is secured in place with a couple of bolts, and this caliper does not have any pads in it. You can see I cannot get it. There's the hole the caliper needs to go over. Here's the hole on the caliper. It needs to go over this hole so the slide pin can go through it. However, there's no pads in here, and there's still not enough room for the caliper to go over the rotor. What it looks like is this mounting bracket is too far back, or too far inward. It needs to be closer to the rotor. The only thing that I can see to do, if you see this mounting bracket, there is a spacer, plastic spacer, right here in between the bracket and mounting plate. But you can also see that the you can also see some of the drum brake sticking out. It's not even all the way in the rotor. Well, after about a week of tinkering around, I finally got the Wilwood D154 floating calipers on the rear of the Trans Am, and this kit was really tough to install because with my aftermarket Moser axles, I have a 2.93 axle offset, and this kit's designed for 2.75 axle offset. So I had to do quite a bit of modifications to the kit, and I called Wilwood, and all of it was okay. For starters, see if I can get this light back in here. Okay, you see where the caliper mounting bracket mounts to the backing plate right here. Well, originally there was this, what Wilwood calls a half moon shim. This shim was between the caliper mounting bracket and the backing plate. In essence, it pushed the bracket back this way to decrease the axle offset. So I removed these Allen bolts here and removed the half moon. Well, these Allen bolts, I removed that shim. These Allen bolts are an exact length so it doesn't make contact when it goes through the rotor. So I had to measure the new length and cut the ends of all the Allen bolts off. There's one down on the bottom to make those the correct length, and bolt the caliper back on. So that got me really close. Well, then I have these nice 12-bolt rear end shims, and this shim can go between the axle flange and the backing plate. And if you see right here, you can barely see the silver steel shim right here in between the backing plate and the axle flange. So this pushes the backing plate forward about 1/16 of an inch, and then removing that half moon shim moves the caliper mounting bracket backwards, and we now have a caliper that is centered on the rotor. And had to do the same on the other side. Had to cut 6 bolts. That was a little tricky because you got to cut them and make sure they thread back in, but everything is on there and it's working. I haven't put the cover plate back on the rear end, but you know, in case I sell the car down the road when I'm done. You can see there's a new Eaton posi differential, and if you look closely, we put some you know, machinist dye or paint on the gears, and if you see, right in the center of each tooth is a wear mark. So that means we set up the pinion depth and the I think it's called lash, because the wear mark is in the dead center of the tooth. That's the strongest part of the gear. That's where you want it. You don't want it at the very top, and you don't want it at the very bottom. You can see the wear mark is right in the dead center. So we set this up really accurate. It's an 800 pound, I'm sorry, 400 pound, I can't remember, it's one or the other, Eaton posi. And have the new leaf springs mounted up. But man, these brakes were a tough job.